you through days from Growler bed to Jay's got stats. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Growler podcast.
All right. Welcome into the latest edition of PD&J on the Growler. Paul Dehner Jr., Jay Morrison here with you on it's Monday evening, and it's been quite the 24 hours, quite the day, quite the everything here as we react to a big day in Bengals world. So sort of a little bit of the first of our emergency podcasts that we'll be doing over the course of the offseason whenever news breaks. And did it ever break today, Jay?
Yeah, it did. And you saw Sunday night, I'm sure Lou, Frank, all those coaches that got let go today were probably thinking that 38-0 game against the Chiefs and Broncos was the worst thing that could have happened. And then they find out today that they're no longer employed by the Bengals. Lou Anarumo, of course, defense coordinator, Frank Pollack, the offensive line coach, James Bettcher, linebacker coach, and Marion Hobby, the defensive line coach. All kind of were thought maybe to be in line to have this happen to them. But one fell swoop, and Zach let all four go this morning.
Yeah, so that was sort of the big news that came out this morning, is that the season ends with the sweeping changes. Essentially, I mean, Chuck Burks, Jordan Kovacs will stay for now on the defensive side of the ball, but they are, Zac Taylor currently hunting a new defensive coordinator. And once that hire is made, there'll be a little bit more decision specifically on their future. But changes, 6 years. Lou Anarumo was the defensive coordinator in Cincinnati. Really, the most important staff member for Zac Taylor because of the nature of how, he spends most of his time with the offense as the offensive play caller. He kind of gives full autonomy to the DC to be a head coach of the defensive side of the football. And Lou has been his man and has been a big part of major wins here, has, the mad scientist, Lou Dini, all of these nicknames that have come up, and those the run in 21 and in 22 with a top 10 group. The playoff run in 21 was magical for that defense. He became the Patrick Mahomes killer. All of these things developed this reputation and was so much part of the fabric of the Bengals renaissance. I mean, Lou Anarumo is still a very good defensive coordinator, defensive mind. I expect him to have opportunities. In fact, our Giants colleagues here at The Athletic were already speculating possible if Shane Bowen's let go, if he doesn't, because Joe Shane and Brian Daboll staying in New York, they could be in the mix for a defensive coordinator. And if they were, you have to think that Lou would be right there at the top of the list, obviously being Staten Island guy, his history with the Giants, his love for that organization. So already the rumors start to circulate about where he could be. I definitely think there's a pretty good chance that Lou Anarumo is a defensive coordinator somewhere in the league next year, but it won't be here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and maybe he's in that same building, just not with the Giants. We don't know. That Jets head coach search could go in any direction, and if there's a guy that gets that job and has a relationship with Lou, or any of these young up-and-coming offensive-minded head coaches, that's what a lot of them like to do, is get paired with a veteran defensive coordinator, and Lou would be a perfect fit. And you mentioned it, 6 years as defensive coordinator. It's tied for the second longest tenure of any Bengals defensive coordinator. Zim was also here for 6 years, from 2009 to 2014, and then 13, yeah. And then and he was 2008 to 13. And then Dick LeBeau had an 8-year run and a 4-year run. But the 8-year run was the longest. So, I mean, it's rare. It's rare anywhere to have a defensive coordinator last for 6 years. You've said this before. You're either getting promoted or you're getting fired. It happens to all of them at some point. Rare what Spags is doing in Kansas City. He started there same time Lou did in 2019. He's won 3 Super Bowl titles. He's probably not going anywhere unless maybe he gets a head coaching job at the end of this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens, and it churns. One interesting thing, I don't know if people would recognize this or realize this, as I was going through it today. You look at the 14 playoff teams, 7 of them, half, hired a new defensive coordinator this year.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just kind of what happens. I mean, that's part of what it is. And and now some of them, like Harbaugh, of course, he's bringing in as a new head coach, but a lot of them that's not the case. It's people that were just looking for a fresh start for their defense, a new voice for their defense. They find it and it works, or at least works enough that they're in the playoffs right now. And that's certainly the hope this time next year. I'm sure if you're Zac Taylor, you hope that is the case. That's what works. So that's the news, and that's kind of where everything's sitting here right now. We're gonna touch on a few different prongs of this. We did have the end of season press conference with Zac Taylor today. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of our thoughts on that, things that he had to say about these moves and maybe some of the other things that came out of that. We'll talk a little bit about the defensive coordinator list, the names that I'm hearing in terms of what they're after, type of guy that they're after, some of the names that would make the most sense and that have been dropped around as we kind of get this thing going a little bit, even though it is still pretty wide open. And then made it down to open locker room today, bared my way through the storm, had a little bit of fun. It was like adult sledding down the highway, basically, today. But did make it down there, and locker clean out had a low turnout from a normal locker turnout because most people, some of these guys have really big trucks and stuff like that. Some of them drive like the low designer sports cars. And those were the guys that didn't show up today. A lot of those guys are like not going to be able to make it, but there were some. And I want to bring you something that Orlando Brown said today that I think is really interesting, specifically in another part of, really, I think a pretty significant symptom of today's move. And that does revolve around the temperature of the seat of one Zac Taylor at this point now after what happens today. So we're going to get into all of that stuff. Let's start with what Zac Taylor did have to say today, Jay. What stood out to you as he sort of addressed these decisions, where they came from, and just it was about 25 minutes with him today.
Mm-hmm. I would say maybe what his response to your question when you asked how he views the job that he did. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about obviously that what Lou and some of those other assistants did, it wasn't good enough. It was a failure, not making the playoffs. And you asked him to assess his own, and he went right to the decision making on a lot of situations late in games when the games were lost a lot of times. And he's talked in the past and kind of talked through what his thought process was and why he did in the moment. But I thought it was interesting that he was very open and candid, said he has to be better in those situations. And, I know a lot of fans would agree with that, and it'll be interesting to see if he, I don't know. I don't understand, because it's such a fast in the moment thing, and without changing your entire philosophy, I don't know how you change that, because it is different from game to game, series to series. And maybe it's more about adding more voices with Sam Francis and on the analytics and what you need to do in these late game situations. But I thought that was really interesting that he went there first off of your question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's something of that probably is it. I mean, that's the most likely answer there is do we need another approach to talking through these situations, more an actual person who's specializing in game management talk. Is it, what does that look like? And so I'm curious to see what that means for him too. But I think a lot of that stuff, I mean, we talked a lot about sort of philosophy, and one that we really got into was, I think a lot of the talk about needing to start faster was interesting today. And a recognition. And he said, look, that's more stuff for me to really dive into as we get through this part. I mean, this is about figuring out the next step forward. And now they're going to be about finding coaches, and then they're going to start getting into the evaluation of free agency and the drafts. And obviously the front office is going to be working on these deals and figuring out what to do there. But then once you get to the, little more time and space to think through things, I think is where you can start to see a little bit more analysis of how do they start faster. But it's a really important question. And I think because, and I have a column I wrote about this today, but you don't get to blow out the staff twice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to go have another bad year next year and fire that defensive coordinator and a couple of assistants. That's not how this works. Okay. When you see the head roll on a coordinator and not just like, somebody who was here for a couple of years. This is a guy who was here for 6 years who did so much good here. I mean, this was a key piece of everything. You don't get to say blow it all up again. That's not, because next time if it goes wrong, it's you chose to start over. You chose to bring in somebody new. It's now on you.
Mm-hmm.
This removes the shield. We're Survivor people, Jay. We watch Survivor.
Yeah.
This is not good target management by Zac Taylor. If that's what that's the name of the game in Survivor, is trying to make sure you're never have the target on you, and there's always somebody a shield in front of you or somebody underneath you. This is he's removed his shield. Okay. And it's all on him now. He's got to get this hire right. He's got to get the assistants right. It has to be the right decision to have even done it in the first place. And then he needs to win quickly. Now, that's not me saying that they're going to fire Zac Taylor in week 5 if they start 1-4 again, right? I'm not necessarily making that insinuation here. But this is the biggest criticism of his tenure, is this consistently slow starting team. And notably, we've joked about Country Club Summer, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's soft. He takes it super easy on those guys so that they're playing their best at the end of the year. Well, they do play their best at the end of the year. They've done it consistently. The month by month breakdown on that is crazy. They're 7-8 the first month of the season. By the way, 1-11 in the first 2 weeks of the year under Zac Taylor. I mean, we know that, and the New England one obviously the most egregious. But then you go 9-7, then 7-6, and then you get into the last 2 months of the year, the playoffs, December, January, regular season, playoffs, 22-8. Right? It does show. I mean, these teams do play better at the end of the year. They are fresher at the end of the year. But this problem earlier in the year is no longer just a quiet little thing because, they played with fire in 21. They played with fire in 22, and the injury in 23 to Burrow. And they got burnt in 24 by it. They couldn't pull themselves out. The ball didn't bounce their way the couple times that they needed to. And there's a lot that goes into that. I still, particularly the very early season stuff here, the New England game, I really put on the Burrow wrist. I mean, I've talked about the velocity numbers with Burrow before, how much he's talked about that. Really, that first 4 or 5 weeks, really at week 5, he started throwing at his normal velocity. He was a shell. He wasn't himself before then, and he was really a shell of himself in the opener. That showed. You had the Jamar distraction, all of that stuff. Bottom line, though, that doesn't excuse everything that happened those first 2 months, and that's got to change. I asked Orlando Brown about that today, and I just want to bring you this it's 2 minutes of what he had to say. And I thought it was interesting hearing someone who wears a C on their chest and is a leader on this team and a part of the past and the future of what they want to be, talking about this problem. Here's Orlando Brown Jr.
Do you feel like you guys kind of relearned the value of the early season games this year? Do you come out of this season as almost a lesson to take away?
Yeah, man, even last year, I guess as I was coming here, I believe they got out to a slow start the year before in 21. You never want to put yourself in that position, and you always want to be able to control your own fate going into the playoffs. Late in December, you don't really want to have to be playing in those games where it's like, you rather it be more so like we got the playoffs clinched. We want to clinch this better seeding position. So we know what we got to take care of, man. We know that coming in, hitting the ground running, starting week 1, taking care of business early on in September, it's going to be a large part of us having our long-term success in the season.
Is there something you feel like you guys can do in the run-up, whether it's in the off-season or in camp, to be a better team early, or is that a mentality thing?
Man, I think it's more mentality than anything. It's hard to win. It's hard to win in life. It's hard to put yourself in good position. You know what I mean? It's hard to really understand all those things. And sometimes at the highest level of football, you got to get used and comfortable with the understanding of pushing yourself to the limit of what it takes to win. And I think that these last 2 years, mentally, we haven't been in that state of mind where our backs are against the wall in December and November, and we got to fight for a chance to get where we want to get. You know what I mean? The mindset, the fire that's lit underneath your ass, and that point needs to be there in July, June, August, all the way through. And so, man, I think that, I take a lot of pride in that as a player, putting more pressure on myself to be more for us at those points.
Do you have to play more? Do you have to play more in the preseason? Do you have to change training camp?
I don't think any of those things need to change. I think most importantly is just the mindset, man. Understanding that when we go out there versus New England, we're 4-8 already. You know what I mean? We got to go out there and earn our right.
The mindset, and the head coach has to be one to set that mindset of intensity and seriousness from day one. And not Chase Brown, I think he called it, instead of getting hot, instead of warming up, he called the early season. It felt like they were warming up instead of getting hot. And, that's something that the coach needs to figure out ways to get going in this team.
Yeah, but I wonder why is the mindset not there? It's the opener. How are you not ready and fired up? And yeah, maybe they look at it as 0-0 because that's what it is instead of 4-8. But I keep going back to those first 2 years where we were talking about the country club summer. The excuse was always, we're in 2022, we're coming off the longest season in NFL history. We went the distance. And then the year after that, they still went to the AFC Championship game. It was a long season. But then that wasn't the case this year. They came off of a regular season. They had entire January off and still kind of took that lighter approach. And I did think it was interesting when Zac was addressing it today, because in the past it was always, that's something we need to look at, but it kind of felt like lip service. Like he liked the way they do things and didn't see a reason to change. But I don't know how you look at this season and not see that smacking you in the face and knowing that something has to change. And it whether it's a mindset, not just week 1 walking into that opener, but a mindset in training camp, in OTAs even, of hitting the ground faster and taking things more serious. And just they all know it. The guys don't want to be beat down early, but it feels like they're willing to embrace a little bit more physical start because they've seen it firsthand. They know what these Septembers have cost them and the situations they've put them in later in years. And it does feel like that some sort of change is coming, more than just what Orlando said, more than just a mindset, a practice script, other kind of things that are probably going to be different this time around, because you really can't. You can't run it back and just keep doing what you've been doing.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Joe Burrow and everybody play in extended time in preseason games, maybe 2, maybe more than 1. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, Burrow has kind of asked that before. Assuming you get Burrow to that spot healthy, that's been the only thing that's really held them back. I truly believe if it wasn't for the wrist situation, the plan would have been for Burrow to play extended time in the preseason this year. He wants that. He recognizes it's been a part of the slow start. And I think that can be an answer. Take a preseason game seriously. Get the crap out of your system quickly and get that to try to help you figure out what you got a little earlier. Just a little earlier, okay? No one's saying to beat the crap out of people in the offseason and to have the world's hardest training camp and things like that, and some of the things that, and all of a sudden start beating up on guys during the season. No, on Wednesday and Thursday practice. No, keep everything you got to do, but just you got to be. It's got to find ways to be more aggressive, and that sounds like something that he's going to be looking into, and that they obviously have to be looking into now as they go forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways in the preseason you worry about worst case scenario of an injury, but you're not seeing exotic blitzes and twists and stunts. It's pretty vanilla on defense, and you can do a lot of quick game. and make sure that Burrow's not exposing himself to unnecessary hits in the preseason, but at the same time getting reps and getting the rust shaken off.
Let's talk a little bit about where they go from here and maybe what the candidate list looks like. And I want to kind of set a little bit of the background for what I think, what I'm sort of heard that they're looking for in this position. The first thing that a lot of people are going to talk about is say, okay, biggest names out there. Who's the big fish, right? And I think that's in play. I'm not going to. I that's an important say. I think this is wide open. I think there's an open mind on this. I don't think this move was made with like candidate X is the front runner who's going to win this job. I think it's interested in talking to a lot of different people about this job. One that is desirable, he called it as desirable as there can be, essentially, or whatever it was that he said. And I think there's truth to that. I mean, Rex Ryan was on TV talking about that today, ESPN, saying, this is a job that anybody should want. Yeah, because think about it. All you got to do is come in and have like the 20th ranked defense, and you're going to win a ton of games. You're going to have improved. You're probably going to be playing in big time games in the postseason, maybe even all the way to the Super Bowl with Burrow. An organization that does tend to have patience. It's a great job. That's all it's one. Any job is going to have its challenges and how bare is the cupboard and this. I mean, if you're taking a new DC job, I mean, there's going to be issues. The bar is so low. Yeah. I mean, when you look at how historically bad things were, not just this year, but even the year before that, just to get some kind of an improvement with a team that has a ton of picks, they're going to have more picks coming in. In terms of they got a lot of young guys still on the roster. They're going to have some money to spend. We'll see how that gets spent, whatever. But it's not like it's some disastrous situation. I mean, they even got some momentum down the last 5 games of the season where you saw some of the young players find comfort, develop a little bit, where you could see them creating a base for something real going forward. It's if you're a defensive coordinator, you'd love to have this job. That said, I think the idea is probably more of a lean towards the best of the up and comers, right? You want experience, you want somebody who has experience and understands leading a team, leading a room that owns that and has plenty of time on task doing something like that. But I think there's still a desire for hungry and not just somebody who's just a head coach retread taking a new job. Just to take a job. And, for that fact, I think that, you can look at some of the names. Jim Leonard is a name. He's DB's coach in Denver. He's got background. He took over for Paul Chryst before Luke Fickell took over in Wisconsin. So he was a head coach there.
Yep.
A name that's really on the mind for people. He's one of these, a Ben Johnson of defense for the defensive coordinator position type deal. A lot of names there. Christian Parker, another one from the Eagles, really young, but I mean, somebody who is kind of the young hotshot type. You can find there's a ton. Pick your pony there. I mean, there's lots of different guys that would potentially fit that bill when you think about that type of player, because I do think it's going to be really important. And Jay, we've talked about this a ton since we've talking about really the Lou situation for, however long now. You got to be able to connect to young players. You got to be able to connect to the young players on this team. It's the reason they're moving on. They have to get development out of the Dax Hills, the Miles Murphys, the Chris Jenkinses, the Cam Taylor Britts, the Jordan Battles, all of these young guys. They have to get development out of those. And that's somebody who's going to come in with that as something they do well. They connect, they get the most out of young players and can develop them. And so the idea of it being a younger type of coach makes some sense there.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a young coach to connect to young players. It helps. But I mean, look what Spags is doing in Kansas City, where they basically gutted that defense. It started with all these young guys, and they haven't missed a beat. I am curious because the name on your list, the Christian Parker, and I hadn't really thought of him, but I mean, he's about the same age as Chuck Burks, and always felt like they're really high on Chuck Burks, and they think maybe he's not quite ready to step into that role. So I don't know that they would go that young, but I love the Leonard idea because he has been someone. First of all, he was an incredible player, and that doesn't always translate to coaching. But he was one of those guys that he looked like a coach on the field when he was playing. I watched a lot of him playing at Wisconsin, a lot of Big Ten games, and he has been really impressive. And to be tapped to be the guy that takes over, especially in this day and age when it's always about offense, and when they let go to Paul Chryst and they turn to Jim Leonard, that I think that speaks volumes. And Zach talked about it today too, where he's not just going to go for somebody with experience. You like to have a guy with experience, but if a guy's got experience, it's because it hasn't worked out somewhere. And the idea of bringing in a hungry young up and comer, it might be a little bit of a risk, but it could be one of those high risk, high reward type of things where it could really pay off. And that is probably the centerpiece, what you said about wanting to connect with the young players. This is a very young defense. It's about to probably get a lot younger.
Yeah, because you're going to see some of the dead weight on defense is going to be older veterans that are going to go. You're going to have more picks that are going to be thrown at this defense. They're not going to give up on the young players that they already have there. So, yeah, you're right. That's what it's going to be. The name that is sort of the connections front runner here, though, is Al Golden. And now it might not be the most exciting name to people, but I think when you look at it a little closer, you see how he would be very enticing and towards the top of this list. He was here as linebackers coach in 20 and 21. And those were pretty good seasons for the linebacker room. I mean, those were
Logan in
all
particular.
young players, all recent draft picks. That's when they had Pratt on there. Then they went Wilson, ADG, Marcus Bailey. They had that draft. They took all three of them. They all developed. They all developed well. Logan Wilson really came on the scene. Pratt, they all, really came along on a really good defense. And he was really helpful and supportive, I think, for Lou Anarumo there. Gets the job as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. Look what has happened there. He's done an incredible job there. And now you're talking about connecting with young players on the college level. Okay. And so proving that you can do that. This is somebody that has done that his entire life. I mean, he turned around Temple. His stint at Miami, it ended ugly, but he had good years there. I mean, he developed a reputation for being able to connect with young players. He understands defense. And he's talked a lot. There's a great story in The Athletic that was written in the lead up to the Sugar Bowl about, how much he learned coming to the NFL and was able to adjust, and some of the techniques and the things that Lou was doing were stuff that he was able to apply at Notre Dame, and it's really paid off. And you're seeing that. Well, if you might be getting the guy at just the right time, and so now would he leave Notre Dame? What does Notre Dame defensive coordinator money look like compared to NFL? Defensive coordinator money, I don't know. Is he happy? Would he get a college head coaching job somewhere potentially if an opening was there that he wanted? There's a lot of questions around all of these guys, but all of the connections there, the organization knows him well. Zac Taylor knows him well. Some of the players even know him well. He's the connections front runner in terms of somebody who makes the most sense on the surface, and I could absolutely see that happening.
Yeah, and I mean, just look across the college landscape, but a lot of these coaches are eager to get out, and whether the older ones retiring or guys wanting to go to the NFL, that just the issue that NIL and the portal is, where you can have a great season, a season like Notre Dame is having right now, and they're probably still going to have guys that are you're counting on for the next couple of years, like, oh no, we had some success, you got to pay me now, and it just feels like it's more hassle than it's worth. And he is a guy that I think would, maybe you hold on at Notre Dame and you start getting some head coaching opportunities in college, but it just feels like even at a school like Notre Dame where the money can be incredible, that it's going to be a better fit in the NFL where you're not dealing with they're still trying to figure out the portal and the NIL and all of that. And I feel like a lot of those coaches are looking to the NFL and to kind of get away from college.
Yeah. Included in the list, and again, that story with the list is up, and I've sort of backgrounds on a lot of these guys. If you want to go to the Athletic, some of the ex-head coaches as well. Dennis Allen is one that makes a ton of sense on the surface. And I mean, he was a part of the original search here. I think I've talked about it on the pod before. And he's had good defenses. I mean, his run from 2017, really, he had essentially a top half of the league defense every single year since 2017 down in New Orleans. You take away this year where he was blown out in the middle of the season, even as a head coach. But I mean, just consistently good, and knows Zac Taylor. They have a relationship there. He was part of the original hiring run when Anarumo was hired. They've had interest. He's available. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily the direction that this thing ends up. He's a name on the surface makes sense there, but how interested is Dennis Allen in that? Is this something that excites him? Because we talked about the beginning, like if you're looking for hungry, ascending, aspiring, driven, is Dennis Allen still that? A guy who'd be going on another professional team, fired as a head coach a couple of times. Like, do you bring that juice? And maybe he does. Like, maybe he does. I mean, the dude just cranks out good defenses. We don't know that, but I'd be curious to see if that is something that holds things up, because that part didn't fit the bill, I think, of some of the stuff that it seems like he's looking for.
Yeah, because with a guy like that, you think he can go one of two ways, where kind of the light goes on that, hey, I had two really bad stints, one at LA, one at New Orleans as a head coach. Probably not going to happen again. So are you content with settling in and being that a defensive coordinator, and maybe the hunger's not there to fight and claw and to try to get another head coaching job? On the other hand, it can happen where you embrace it and you're like, okay, this is where I'm best. This is where I fit best. And it's like, just like the players, it's all about trying to win a ring and coming here and knowing that he's going to work with the Joe Burrow and with this offense. Maybe that one does make sense, but you do worry about that, where a guy kind of levels off and then you just wonder if the career not only plateaus, but kind of the enthusiasm and just the drive to be great.
And along hitting the same notes, Mike Zimmer, obviously a guy who's beloved in Cincinnati. Ownership loves him.
Yeah.
He's got his property still, and we heard Zack Taylor this year just effusively praising how hard it is to play a Mike Zimmer defense and how exhausting it is mentally and emotionally and physically on the players. And that said, he's 68.
Yeah. Relating to
I don't know that Zim is the answer here, but I would just I included him just because of the connections, right? And who knows? We still don't even know what's happening with the Cowboys. Apparently, like, the Bears are trying to get Mike McCarthy. What is happening? I mean, I'm stunned that Mike McCarthy is still the head coach of the Cowboys. Another team wants in on that, and of course it's the Bears. Caleb Williams is going to just walk himself into Lake Michigan and just say it's over, right? Like, he's just done. I'd rather freeze than deal with this at this point. Amazing. But anyways, we still don't even know if Zimmer's going to stick around in Dallas or what the situation would be there. So I think the list is wide open. I think names can pop up and emerge. Gus Bradley was let go by Indianapolis today. He's got a relationship with the Burrow family, obviously.
Very close.
And Bradley has certainly been a guy they've talked very nicely about when they've played him a number of times over the years, which really brings me to my surprise name that I really should have put on the list today, Jay. What about Jimmy Burrow? Huh? Defensive coordinator background. Go all Burrows. Go Jimmy Burrow. Let's go.
His son can help him relate.
DC. It's time.
Joe could help him relate to the young guys. It'd be
No
great to
doubt.
have a Ohio University connection, another one in the locker room.
We need that.
But yeah, that is a ship has sailed situation. Obviously, with the one we haven't talked about, I want to get your thought. Well, what about Robert Saleh? Where do you think he would fall on? Because I still think he has a future as a head coach in this league. That it just was such a bad situation. It's always a bad situation in New York with the Jets, and that could be a thing where he comes in for a year or two and does a great bang up job with this defense, and or maybe he's getting interviews right now, or getting requests for interviews to, in this hiring cycle, just coming off of what happened in New York. Because I don't think anybody thought he should have got fired. And the fact that the Jets tanked the way they did after they let him go, maybe some teams are having second thoughts about him as a head coach. But would the Bengals be able to pry him away as a defensive coordinator?
Well, I mean, as a fellow proud bald, I'd welcome him with open arms.
Of
Okay.
course.
So it'd be nice to have another bald in our midst, especially a young bald. He's 45, so we're about the same age. I mean, he's really embraced the baldness for a while now as well, so I appreciate that. I don't know that he's a personality fit, just from, when the stories I've heard around the league about just sort of and not intensity is the wrong word, but just not necessarily the same coaching and teaching style that we've seen from really this entire staff. Just a little different in that regard, in the way that he is as a communicator. Now, Lou is a little different as a communicator, and lots of guys, you get across how you get across, and he certainly had good defenses. So again, I think that's one of those that's on the list, but I don't know that it's high up the list.
Okay.
And so, and he would probably be, and I'm not saying this is a reason why, but I think they would be willing to pay a good amount of money, and a more than reasonable amount of money, to someone they felt was really the perfect fit and worth it. And I don't know that he is the perfect fit and worth it on this particular staff in totality. And that can change. You talk to somebody, you interview, you get a couple of references that change your mind, and you see things in a different light. That's possible, but I don't see that one happening. But it's an obvious name. I mean, it's the biggest name that's out there in terms of defensive coordinators.
Yeah, I mean, interesting that he's right now working as an offensive consultant for the Green Bay Packers, and Matt LaFleur, one of Zach's best friends, would have some honest feedback on what Robert's coaching style is like, and whether, I mean, Matt knows Zach well. He would be able to tell him, yeah, this guy would fit with you guys or not. So, but I thought that was the first name that came to mind when you start thinking about replacements. But I do wonder if he's going to get a head coach look somewhere in this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, the cycle is off. There's more continuity than you would have expected, kind of happen. I mean, that whatever the Giants are doing, and Trent Baalke is sticking around as GM in Jacksonville. That's amazing. Like, so there's a lot of weird stuff happening right now. Brian Callahan is sticking along with Rand Carthon in Tennessee. They have the number 1 overall pick. So Callahan, in year 2 in a new place, gets the number 1 overall pick and needs a quarterback. It all sounds very familiar, right?
Yes, it does.
Down this road before. One major difference: Joe Burrow not at the end of that rainbow.
No.
And so it's not a great year to need a quarterback, but Brian will be taking his pick of this particular litter. But again, Gerard Mayo, he ends up getting let go in New England. That really feels like Mike Vrabel is going to end up there.
Yeah.
He certainly is a front runner, given the Patriots' background and his everything that he is. Feels like there's a little wink, wink, nod, nod. If we get rid of Mayo, would you come here? And if the answer was yes, they make that move. But there's not a ton of action out there right now, and we haven't had, Dan Pitcher has not gotten any slips put in yet for him, as far as I know. Trey Brown, Bengals scout, exec has been put in for the GM job with, is that the Jets?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jets GM job. So that's the beginning of, but again, that process is just now beginning, just kind of fully getting started, and there'll be plenty of movement that will occur from this point forward. Anything else quick outside there's a lot of talk of free agents. We'll get more into free agents
Yeah.
here down the line. A little bit more talk about T. Higgins and the word hopeful being used by Zac Taylor about signing him. You know, nice to hear. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. None of those guys were in the locker room today. Burrow was there. Jermaine Burton was there. He denied a request to talk. But none of there weren't a ton of people down in there. So there wasn't quite as many people to chat up on some of this stuff. But either way, anything else stick out to you?
Well, I had one other thought when we were discussing earlier in the show about Lou and where he could end up. And one of the hot candidates right now is the Lions defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. If he moves on and gets a head coaching job, Lou has worked with Dan Campbell in Miami. That would be a great fit, a great landing spot for Lou.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, once you do get that movement going, a lot of opportunities. You're exactly right about that. It would make a ton of sense for him there. He's got the no nonsense, straightforward style also, and the island of misfit toys. They're not going to give a damn about somebody that was fired. Okay, I mean they kind of thrive in that, are the people that have the second, third, fourth chances there and make the most out of it. So yeah, but either way. A lot of interesting stuff and a lot of news to come out from the coach. So we'll be following this now. The next step, basically, we'll be going through this interview process. Let's talk about Frank Pollack here. We spent a lot of this time on defense and the other guys. I don't know. Were you surprised by the Pollack addition?
I wouldn't say surprised. It felt kind of the same thing where just needing a fresh start, and not necessarily that he did a terrible job, but there are a lot of things to point fingers at, and the lack of development, the regression actually of Cordell Volson, and then some of these other guys. And yeah, it felt like Amarius Mims was kind of a feather in his hat, but that dude's an incredible athlete. I think a lot of offensive line coaches could have got something out of Amarius this year as a rookie. So it's another one of those things where it felt like it was time, that it had run its course. I don't think it was an egregious performance this year, and it's like, oh, you got to get rid of that guy. But there's enough there to not like, and to think that something could be better, and not just better, but different, a different voice, a different style. Frank's not really, didn't feel like a great fit, personality wise for what this coaching staff is. And it was kind of, they let him go once to bring in Jim Turner when Zach first got here, and then that didn't go very well. So they went back to the familiar face. And I wasn't surprised, but I could have seen a path for them to stick with Frank and make this just a defensive blowout.
Yeah, I'm with you where you could have seen that, but I mean, you're right. It just felt like it had run its course. The line, did some good things, but it was as a whole disappointing. I mean, nobody took more hits this year than Joe Burrow. No quarterback, 122 total hits on Burrow this year. CJ Stroud was second with 109. And part of that is how often they threw, the volume of throwing. Part of that was, his play style and him needing to be more of a playmaker this year. He was constantly trying to extend more so than he probably normally was. But a lot of that is because he was running for his life all the time. I mean, the Houdini act is fun. I enjoy watching it. I don't have to take those hits. Okay. And, the constant need to make those plays causes a lot of those fumbles, causes a lot of the turnover stuff that crept up there towards the end of the year when you're having to feel like you're constantly having to make those plays. Now, part of that was the defensive side of the ball played into that too. They're constantly having to throw it because they're playing from behind or having to match scores, and they can't go out there and just run the ball and get guys going that way. And so your run game never truly takes off. And that wasn't great. I mean, 4.1 yards per carry from your running backs this year is mad in a time where the running backs are shining everywhere, and they're seeing more light boxes, than almost anybody in football consistently, because people are so scared of the receivers in the passing game. So, the inability to get more out of that, they're going to have to find a new name there. One thing that we talked about last year when they brought in Justin Riscotti from Minnesota was he has an O-line background. Now he's passing game quarterback at heart. That's kind of where he's at his best. But in Denver, in Minnesota, he did O-line work, and they really liked him there. The thought, okay, is there any possibility then that he could be one to move over and they could refill a passing game coordinator role? That's not going to happen. I think they really like what Justin did to help the offense this year, and the way he worked with Pitch and the way he worked with Zac Taylor and the relationship he developed with Joe Burrow and all of that. So that sounds like that's not going to be a part of where they go. They're just going to find an offensive line coach, figure out who that is, go through some interviews and find their guy. But another big hire and a lot of nervousness there because, the Jim Turner hire is one of the all-time worst, and holding on to him was even dumber. And then Frank Pollack has been, and the protection of Burrow is at stake. And can you find somebody that can come in here and finally get it right and get this offensive line right? And oh, by the way, maybe get the drafting right too, because that has been such a problem for so long. And so can they finally develop some guys there? All of that is kind of in question as they try to figure out where to go next.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting if the guy they bring in is the run game coordinator, if they hire a separate run game coordinator. And you're right, this coaching staff is as involved in the draft as any team in the league, and that is a big part of that too. Where it's not a great look for the front office, but part of that's on Frank too.
No doubt about it. All right, so that kind of wraps up a little bit of all the coaching news that went down today. Again, make sure you're going and checking out Jay's work over at SI. Go to The Athletic. We've got all kinds of stories, columns, informative lists, you name it, many different types, platforms that you can take in for all this information and stuff. So make sure you go check all that stuff out for a little bit more information. Jay, while we're here and talking, we should wrap up the Growler bet from this weekend.
Yeah.
We did Steelers Yak. Okay, so they had 264 in the first game, which was the most by any team in the league this year. What did the number end up?
It's only 58 this week. They rallied and tackled pretty well. And there was still a lot of the short passes, and they got helped out by some drops by George Pickens. That there would have been some more Yak, but just 58. Nobody guessed lower than 58, and nobody really got close to 58 on the high side. We had Glenn Hammerly, our pseudonym Harambe friend, had guessed, of course, 69, and that was the closest one to the final number of 58. So hard one to hit. I edged you, but we both went really high too. I had 121 and you had 155. So a pretty strong performance to be the final one of the Lou Anarumo career.
Really disappointed in the Growl Pals. Only one guess of 69 to be.
I know, that
close,
was surprising.
to be so close. It's just disappointing. New year, new you. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Now, if that's the resolutions that people are making, is to stop guessing 69 on Growler bets, well, this is not a year that I want to be a part of. Okay,
just mailing in the finale.
Who we are. God, it's disappointing. I do want to shout out a couple of subject headers here. First one was from Jay Frelick. You don't live in Cleveland, you live in Yak hell. And he went with 666 Yak yards, which I appreciate. Well done. This one from Cody Story, which I'm pretty sure Jess wanted to get this shot at Pittsburgh in. If you're going to give the United States an enema, you'd stick the hose in Pittsburgh. And then he just said Growler for no reason after that, which I appreciate. Like, I just want to get this shot in at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a lovely town. By the way, if you listen to Who Dey Light, you heard about our recommendation for La Tavola, the Italian spot up at Mount Washington. We went there. It was incredible. We drank wine. We ate pasta. It was an amazing time. I recommend it to anybody that goes to Pittsburgh. You got to go. First of all, the Mount Washington neighborhood, you got to get up there. Second of all, go to La Tavola. Tell them we sent you, because I think we're trying to make best friends with all the owners up here so we can keep getting hooked up every time we go. I have one more here. This one from Tim Pollard. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance to come back here and tell our enemies that they may not take our lives, but they'll never take our Growler bet? Little Braveheart for you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Tim. Well done, everybody. Thanks everybody that has sent those in this year. Always cracking me up. You guys are the best. So no winners. No winners in the Growler bet. As we get through into the offseason here, don't worry. We love trying to come up with some good offseason Growler bets that we can put in for you and make sure we get some winners. And if you've won and you weren't able to come down to one of our live shows at Nation BetMGM, please send an email, send anything into the Growler podcast at gmail.com and let us know. And we'll make sure we find a way to hook you up. All right. Jay, do you have any Arby's? Do you have any Arby's either from the weekend, from today, from what do you got?
I don't. I was one of the ones that did not make it down today. I was snowed in basically up here in Hamilton, and I am very sore right now after going out and shoveling a lot of heavy snow. Not just shoveling the walk, but shoveling the street to make a room to get my car out in case I do need to go anywhere. So I missed the locker clean out today. It didn't sound like it was robust. So I'll defer to you on the Arby's on this one.
Yeah. By the way, we forgot to mention defensive coordinator candidate Marvin Lewis earlier.
That would be amazing.
That's probably worth a shout out in Arby's. Or people trying to send me into some sort of PTSD here. The idea of that happening, but no, Marvin Lewis not happening, but would be funny. Definitely the funniest thing that they could do at this point.
Add him to the game management staff.
Yeah, you. Well, I mean, look, it worked for the Raiders.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you keep it rolling here? Speaking of what are they doing? What is happening? The Raiders.
Yeah, I don't think they know.
Do they ever know?
No.
All right, mine is the drive down today. I didn't know if I was going to do it. Like they moved Zac Taylor's should have been news conference to Zoom, and but the locker room's still open if you want to try to brave it and come down. There's supposed to be a meeting. Guys are around. I'm staring out my window, and I can't even hardly see my car. It's just covered. I don't even know what's going on with the street other than everything looks like it's just one giant blanket of just snow. I mean, I'm like, how would I even get out of here? Got on the phone with James Rapine. We were talking through it. Like, are you going? Are you going? And we talked each other into it. We both, I think both of us were leaning no. And after we talked to each other, we're like, let's go. Let's go. We were doing the Joe Burrow face after the Giants rushing touchdown at each other. Oh, let's go. And so we decided we were going to give it a shot. I get out there. I've never more quickly had regrets than I did just trying to clean off my car and get everything off of it. But I got to play with the snow mode in the four-wheel drive on the Cherokee today. It got me real excited. I was like, oh wait, this is actually, I think it might be fun. Now I understand the dangers. And I was a little bit, but it was an adrenaline rush. I was not expecting the rush that I was getting from being out there when there's just no cars.
Yes, that's the best part.
You're recognizing the fact that you're so stupid for being out here. Okay. The only cars that are out here are like a couple and they're stuck in a snowbank. All right now. And so I'm thinking like, oh, I don't think I should be doing this. When you go, like, I'm at the ramp to go onto the highway and I'm like, all right, are you really going to do it? Are you really going to do it? And I did it, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, I don't know why I am getting such a rush from this, but I'm really enjoying it. It's a little dangerous, but I feel like I'm really living my best life right now. And there was no feeling like walking in to that media room, arms extended in the air. Made it.
Made it.
Made it. Unbelievable. And we reap all the rewards of the like 6 interviews with guys that are actually down here. But that's all right.
Did you find any open, empty parking lots and just do donuts in snow mode?
I could have in the lot that we normally park in, which is down caddy corner from the stadium off Central. No, it was had not been plowed. There was 2 cars in the entire massive lot. And I was like, oh, the boss. I didn't directly go to doing donuts like you do. In that situation, I was mostly thinking like, I'm safe and alive. Thank God. I'm just going to go try to walk in. But the funny, you get into downtown and there's no cars anywhere, but there are just people walking in the middle of the street all over the place.
Yeah.
Because the sidewalks were not cut. So it's easier to walk in the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm standing in downtown between the stadiums and the skyscrapers and everything else. Not a car within sight, but there's like 4 people just walking out in the middle of the street right at me. And I'm like, this is the most surreal thing ever. In the middle of the day on a Monday, just a crazy experience. What a storm, man. Just unreal. And but anyway, very exciting to get out there. I'm gonna be disappointed I won't get to go out there and get slip sliding around again tomorrow.
You can. I don't think this snow's going away for a while.
It's true. I can.
It's gonna be cold.
I can. I got nowhere to go. I got nowhere to go tomorrow though. We'll see. Oh wait, I do. I'm going with Mo tomorrow. Mo in Kenwood.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll meet you for donuts in the mall parking lot.
Donuts
Not the kind you eat.
Kenwood Mall. Let's go. Who's in? All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Speaking of Mo, you'll be hearing from Mo this week. We had to push off the rewatch with Charlie as all the news was going down today. So we'll get to a Charlie rewatch. He had a great list of the 33 plays that sunk the Bengals season. He went down to win probability loss through all the critical losses, and I want to talk to him a little bit about that and go through some of those plays. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about free agents here very soon too. So we've got a lot of stuff coming your way, and then we're going to get to as we kind of get through all our season wrap up stuff. But this was certainly the big first shoe to drop today, and thanks to everybody for that read and that listened and stuck with us here today. But we'll have plenty more coming your way this week. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.